Welcome back to Opinion Journal. I'm Mary Kissel. The news out of Israel is that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will remain in office, it looks like, but maybe with not such a big majority. Global View columnist Bret Stephens is here to analyze what happened and give us, as always, his informed opinion. Bret, did this election have anything to do at all with what gets most media attention, the West Bank, Gaza, Iran? Or did it have to do with something else?
Well, with Israeli elections, it's always a little complicated. This election was really fought over domestic Israeli issues. The cost of living, the question of whether particularly Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews, but also Israeli Arabs, should serve in the military. Those are certainly the questions, the issues that propelled this party that came out of nowhere called Yesh Atid, headed by a former television personality, to gain 19 seats in the Knesset. It is now the second largest bloc in the Knesset after Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party, which has 31 seats but lost about 10 seats.
I'm glad that you raised that. Yair, is it Lapid? Am I saying Lapid? Am I saying that correctly? So he's the head of this party that placed second.
Right.
I understand you knew his father. Can you give us any insight into this guy?
His father, Tommy Lapid, was a Holocaust survivor and a longtime journalist in Israel who founded or was a founder of something called the Shinui Party, which is actually a lot like his son's party. It essentially represented the middle-class secular interest in Israel. And during the Sharon government, when I was living in Israel 10 years ago, he had done very well in one of these elections and was made Minister of Justice. Now, it's a phenomenon in Israel that you have these parties that seem to come out of nowhere to represent a movement, and then they will take some large number of seats in the Knesset, and then they vanish. For instance, Kadima, which was a party founded less than a decade ago, and which had a prime minister, Ehud Olmert was from Kadima, was in fact the largest single party in the last Knesset, has now been reduced to anywhere between 2 and 0 seats. I'm not quite sure whether they actually made the threshold. So it's likely that Yair Lapid's party will also be a kind of one parliament type of party with relatively little staying power, but we know very little about his political chops. This party was founded in April.
Well, we know, though, a lot about Mr. Netanyahu and what a strategic politician that he is. How is he likely to react to this turn of events? How do you see him navigating these new political waters?
Well, you know, one interpretation, and it's not an unfair one, is that he squeaked by, and now he's going to have a very troubled tenure for what's left to him as prime minister. His mistake was this. Everyone thought he was going to coast to re-election, right? And so he decided to call elections earlier, basically telling Israelis, vote for me because you know I'm going to win anyway. And so Israelis said, well, if you're going to win anyway, there's this other guy who seems sort of interesting and this other woman and so on. So that's what happened. One story that you're not going to hear in other venues about this election is that the left in Israel did pretty poorly.
Why is that, Bret?
Because Israelis, we're approaching the 20th anniversary of the Oslo Agreement. Israelis are sick of a, quote, Palestinian partner who isn't really a partner, who doesn't operate in good faith. They're looking at Hamas in Gaza. They're looking at the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. They're looking at a nuclear Iran. And Israelis just have to accept the neighborhood they're in. It's not like they're anti-peace, okay, but they have to take account of realities that to them are very close and to us are pretty distant.
Global View columnist Bret Stephens, the left is dead in Israel but alive in the United States. Thanks, Bret.
Thank you.